In this video, we're talking about the April paper filters. Welcome, my name is Patrick Rolfe, and this is Coffee with April. For this episode, we are going to talk about paper filters because April just launched our new second size paper filter. And there's a few things that we want to discuss in general just about the product, but also about the fact that we're doing a lot of homebrewing videos around the world now with people using the April brewer. And we see all of these kind of different techniques to rinsing filters, not rinsing filters, different temperatures. So we just wanted to do a really kind of quick, short, efficient video telling you a little bit about how we work with the paper filters here at April. So kind of tips and tricks in terms of how to use them, and also explain why do we have a different size paper filter. Now, first of all, it's important to understand that the paper filters, both the small and the larger versions, is the exact same kind of paper filter. So that basically means that the mass, the weight of it is more or less identical, right? So the difference here comes down to the actual shape of it. And it's kind of self-explanatory in terms of why we did it, because our different brewers have slightly different shape, a little bit depending on the production process, right? So each materials limits or enables different ways and different kind of size and measurements. If you look at, for example, the plastic brewer here, one of the interesting things when you produce plastic is that you can be very, very precise in terms of the measurements. But then on the other hand, we have the glass brewer that, for example, is handmade, and the ceramic that is also made in a different way, right? And depending on the material we use and the way of production, the shape will come out a little bit differently. And we wanted to do paper filters that could optimize the quality for each of these individual brewers. So a lot of you have seen this. This is what we today call the smaller paper filter. And the smaller paper filter is then the original paper filter. So obviously it's totally good to use on each of the brewers, right? Because that's what we've been doing in the past as well for quite a long time, and it served us very well. But we realized that there are ways to actually improve it in terms of the shape, especially when we come to the plastic brewer. A lot of you have seen that the smaller filter in the plastic brewer, both in terms of the height, but also in terms of the dimension of the bottom, doesn't quite fill out the brewer. Now, what this does is that it's actually creating a slightly different flow rate because it's more narrow. So how narrow a brewer is, or the paper filter you're using, is going to impact basically how the water goes through, meaning in this case, that will go through a little bit faster. So the second generation of filter, what we've done, and we created this initially specifically for the plastic brewer because it was easier for us to do size and measurements that would fit perfectly. So what we've done here is that we basically extended the diameter of the bottom circle in the filter, and also then increased the height of the filter so that you could fill up a higher water level, basically brewing a larger brew if you would want to. So that is the main difference. Now, when it comes to the bigger filter, this goes perfectly well to use, for example, in the glass brewer as well. It's actually a very good fit. But we are looking to launch now the fourth generation of the April ceramic brewer. And in this, we still recommend to use the small paper filters, just because the size and the dimensions of that is a little bit different from the other brewers. Now, when it comes to the paper filters, we just want to show you a little bit how we actually rinse them. And again, doing the different homebrewing videos has brought up some interesting examples of how to do it. We've seen people using pouring kettles. We've seen people holding it underneath a water tap as well, which seems to actually be working really well. We've seen it done with cold temperature and hot temperature. Now, I've personally not tasted enough coffees, and I tried quite a lot of coffees in my life, to say with a clear idea that you need to have a high temperature water to rinse the filter. I've tasted some brews that was rinsed with a lower temperature, and that tasted just fine as well, right? But for the purpose of this video, we just want to show you how we actually rinse them to make sure that the paper filter sits perfectly in each of the filters. And it's pretty much the same process regardless of the filter you're using. What you want to do is to first of all put the filter into the brewer, kind of self-explanatory. If you look at the new one that fits perfectly into the plastic brewer, it's a lot easier, but it's the same principle if you have the smaller one as well. So step 1, get the paper filter inside of the brewer. 2, take your fingers, just hold it down, make sure that it's centered and leveled. And then you just take a little bit of water and pour that in the very center of the filter to make sure that the base is wet. I normally do that, let that sit sunk in to make sure that it basically fits 100%. After that, I pour a very gentle amount of water around the circle of the paper filter, about 50 grams of water in total, and then I'm pretty much done. It's really not much more complicated. What you have to think about is that if you're not holding it down properly and putting the water in the center initially, you can end up with a paper filter that moves a little bit and it's not 100% consistent. And again, a lot of the times when we talk about how to brew coffee here at April, it's going to be based on brewing several coffees at the same time. And we want to make sure that we have consistency. So the same goes here when we're using the smaller paper filter. We're basically using our fingers to make sure it's centered. Pour a little bit in the center, and then you're going to see that actually shapes up really nicely. And after that, again, a gentle amount of water just on the sides, and it spreads out evenly and you're good to go. So it's actually really simple. It's just a little bit of trick. Another thing you can think about that I always do with the paper filters is that when I first unpack them, they basically sit like this. And then I take it half and half. And I basically switch the top part to the bottom part, which means that the initial filters that I'm using has a much better shape. And when I've used the initial part and go into the bottom, they're actually going to have a much better shape again, right? So again, it's a bit of consistency here as well, right? So there are a few kind of easy tips and tricks. In the end of the day, the main thing with the new filter is the fact, again, that we have a larger bottom diameter, which basically stretches out your coffee bed, makes it a little bit more uniform, a little bit thinner. And this is then going to have a different flow rate and allow your coffee to be extracted slightly differently as well. So, of course, if you want to try out the differences between the two filters, that's kind of an interesting way to get a more dynamic result out of your April brewer. But in general, what you should be looking for is a paper filter that fits perfectly with the brewer that you're using. So let's say you, for example, have the April brewer at home, make sure to try those large filters because they're going to make a big improvement overall when it comes to your brew. Now, in general, and you kind of end this video, we know the paper filter is massively discussed at the moment across the board. We see a lot of different versions of it. We see no bypass filters, which technically doesn't exist. There's always a little bit of bypass, but let's say a different amount of bypass. And we're really interested to hear your thoughts about paper filters in general. What is it that you're looking for? Are you looking for faster, slower, better, thicker? Whatever, what is your kind of impression of different paper filters? Because it's something that we are looking into here at April in order to improve and make better as well. So with that, we just want to thank you for watching as per usual. This was just a short little video about how we deal with our paper filters, what's new and how we rinse them, right? Any comments, always just fill up below. We're super happy when you engage with us. As always, subscribing, sharing is really helpful, so make sure you do that. And sign up for Patreon because that's where we're teasing all the new releases, right? So with that, just have a good day and thank you for watching. We want to give a special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. It's because of you that we are able to continue to make these videos. And we want you all to feel free to always come with suggestions and ideas on the content that you want to see because we are doing this for you and because of you. Thank you from all of us here at April.